Bing bong. I am live with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast. And for those listening on podcasting 2.0 apps such as Fountain, I greatly appreciate you all sending me sats, streaming it, giving me boosts and whatnot. There's no boost on the last episode where people left me messages, but there were some stats streamed. So those are greatly appreciated. And I'm using those to kind of try to help and create a circular economy in Tampa Bay. So I use those to actually purchase one of the Florida Beef Initiative boxes. Obviously, there wasn't enough sats streamed in order for me to purchase that whole thing, but I was able to, use some of that to purchase some of that. So I'm looking forward to picking that up when I'm back in town. And I also want to shout out the Bitcoin Bay workshop. So if you're in the Tampa Bay area, they're doing a Bitcoin Bay workshop for all businesses where you can learn how to interact with Bitcoin. They'll go over accounting, taxes, and most importantly, storage. Like what's the best storage practices and other things like that. I will put that Eventbrite in the show notes, whether you're listening on YouTube or audio. And then I'd also like to thank my sponsors. I got Bitcoin Miami 2023. If you're on the fence about going to Bitcoin Miami, I think you should do it because meeting Bitcoiners in person is one of my favorite things to do of all time. There's going to be a ton of Bitcoiners there in Miami. Big names from Marty Bent and Ben Sessions and all the guys you can think of who are going to be there making some announcements, just going hands, shaking hands, kissing babies, doing the whole nine. So use promo code Green Candle in all caps to get 10% off of your Bitcoin Miami ticket. And I hope to see you all there. And then lastly, shout out to HODL Storage. You guys know HODL Storage if you've been listening to me. They're the best punch plates in the game. Use promo code Green Candle for 10% off of your punch plate. So get it off an exchange and use a punch plate to store that seed phrase. And now, after all of that, I've got a very special guest who I'm really excited to have on and have a great discussion with. I got Wicked here. So Wicked, man, how you doing?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. For some reason, I'm sitting here looking at your animation, your picture that you got there, and I'm waiting for your mouth to just talk on it, but it's not moving. But yeah, you do
I
a
haven't
bunch of
gotten around to that yet.
yeah, you do a bunch of great animations and other things like that. So tell us a little bit about that, and yeah, kind of how you got started in Bitcoin and decided to kind of start making some of these great animations that we see all over Twitter.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say I got officially orange pilled in 2020. So, like, I'm pretty recent in terms of like being fully orange pilled. But it was right before the bull run, and I came on Twitter for the first time. I didn't really know about Bitcoin Twitter very much. Came on Twitter, just started getting to know some people here, some Bitcoiners and whatnot, and then started making charts mostly for myself, just to track Bitcoin, you know, statistics and stuff, and just various qualities of Bitcoin. Then when I posted them, people liked them. So that's kind of how that worked out. And since then, I've transitioned. Well, not transitioned, but I've like I've started doing more like education stuff. So like trying to teach clubs about self custody through going on spaces and stuff. Um, and then just education in the form of my animations as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's great because I think that's kind of how we met was through Twitter Spaces, and listening to you, I'm shocked to hear that you're class of 2020 because you seem to have a lot of knowledge when it comes to whether it's self custody, and then I think I remember talking to you about BIP, either BIP 11, what was it, BIP 119 or whatever it was with the Jeremy Rubin one, where I
Yeah,
came on
yeah.
with you and Gandalf, where we're kind of going back and forth on that, so. Yeah, I mean, I guess talk a little bit about that because it seems like you kind of dived fully into the rabbit hole. So I guess what part of Bitcoin kind of I guess most resonated with you in the beginning that kind of made you I guess go down that rabbit hole because I kind of see like three avenues of Bitcoin. Some people kind of see the energy aspect with mining, some like the code and kind of the development, seeing like maybe something like the Lightning Network and kind of dive into that, and then others kind of like the philosophical aspect of it, whether it's personal freedom, self-sovereignty, that kind of stuff. So yeah, what kind of I guess drove you to Bitcoin in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. So I'm just a pleb, and I started to save some money, and I just wanted to know where to put it, right? And so once I learned more about Bitcoin, I realized that Bitcoin is the money, and you just save it, and that's it. And like like being simple, like you just kind of have to simplify your life in a lot of ways, especially if you want to work and specialize in a field. Like you can't be wasting your time worrying about investments and stuff. So once I learned that Bitcoin was better money, it freed up a lot of time for me to do other things, like make animations about Bitcoin, but like other things too, like actually perform better my fiat job and stuff and all that. So I just really fell down the rabbit hole in terms of like realizing that this money, this tool, right, Bitcoin, is just such a powerful idea for regular people who just want to work hard and save the wealth, right? It allows us to like unlock another level of proof of work because now we have so much extra brain power. We don't have to worry about like where are we gonna put our shitty dollars and just like save our sats. That's it. So that was like, that's kind of what brought me down the rabbit hole. And since then, of course, like I've gone and tried to get to every, you know, nook and cranny, but it's never ending. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's a great point because I've talked about this a couple times with some other people, on and offline and whatnot. But I think that's kind of like the big eye-opening thing for a lot of people is that they realize like, hey, I gotta wake up early, gotta either, walk the dog, make breakfast, whatever, do the hour commute, then go, into the office, leave 5:30, sit in traffic, get back like 6 o'clock, and then I gotta go home and research about, what I'm gonna do with my money, whether that's, stocks, real estate, whatever it is. And then stress about making my dollar go as far as it can because this inflationary monetary system just kind of puts people in this corner where eventually, your wage is basically not going to increase at the rate that inflation is, especially now. And if you want to increase your lifestyle and other things like that, it's just really difficult these days with that. So I definitely resonate with that, and I think with what is all going on right now, whether it's the bank runs or the massive amounts of inflation, I think more and more people are going to start kind of, I guess, finding Bitcoin in a sense. So I kind of want to get down the rabbit hole with you with self custody and the importance of that. So let's just start there. Why do you think self custody is so important? And yeah, what is your mission behind, I guess, like educating all these people to kind of, I guess, become self sovereign in a sense?
Yeah. Definitely. So self custody is, I'd say, one of the most important features of Bitcoin, right? So, I mean, you might get into Bitcoin because you want to save your money and, and build wealth. But ultimately, what matters is that you keep that wealth. And if you don't hold the keys to your Bitcoin, you're trusting someone else with that Bitcoin. And it's happened many, many times that people who, were trusted with Bitcoin lose it or steal it. So one of the really nice things about Bitcoin is that you can take self-custody. You can literally hold the keys yourself, right? You can do this in many forms. You can hold the keys by stamping 12 words into a piece of metal. You can hold the keys by, storing it on what's called a signing device or a hardware wallet. You can hold the keys on your phone. Like you can hold the keys in lots of different ways that work for, lots of different types of situations. But the point is that you can do that without having to trust anybody. So, the responsibility gets put on you for doing it properly, but now you don't have to worry about someone losing your money or stealing it.
Yeah, that's 100%, correct. And then, but I guess let me play devil's advocate with you here. So, I guess to the average person, that might sound a little daunting. So, I guess line out the process for me of self custody. And, I mean, because although I'm trying to play devil's advocate, I can't like I can't do it because we've seen so many of these exchanges like Celsius, Voyager, And like there's cracks in Binance now, and we've even seen some cracks in Coinbase and some of the other major ones that, from an out somebody who doesn't have, a significant portion of a stack on any exchange. It just worries me for all these people that I know that hold a lot because they're just worried about holding, their own keys and whatnot. So, explain that process. Like, what do you think? I guess the best practice is to kind of, pull off your Bitcoin off an exchange,
Mhm.
and then let's dive into what is a UTXO, and how do people, I guess, become a little bit more aware of their UTXOs.
Sure. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, we can kind of combine those questions because, pulling your Bitcoin off the exchange involves UTXOs. So maybe let's start with just defining that. So UTXO, we'll break it down by the letter. U stands for unspent, TX stands for transaction, and O stands for output, right? So, I mean, we probably don't have to get into like what that means specifically, but the point, what a UTXO is, it's really just a chunk of Bitcoin. Okay. So I think it's useful to think of Bitcoin in this case like digital gold because Bitcoin comes in chunks in the same way that gold comes in chunks. Okay. And when you spend it and move it around, you're literally moving those chunks around. So you can move around one chunk at a time and it can be big or small, or you can move around multiple chunks, like, merge them together and send it into one, larger chunk or break it up into smaller chunks. So these chunks are just UTXOs. A UTXO is a chunk of Bitcoin. It's a chunk of Bitcoin that hasn't been spent before. That's why it's unspent. And that allows you to spend it. And then it turns into other UTXOs and on forever, right? But yeah, that's the idea behind a UTXO. And then in terms of taking it off an exchange, um, I don't know. Do you want me to talk about like the different steps of self custody, or like
Yeah,
what
yeah, for
exactly you want to
sure.
talk about?
Yeah, the different steps of self custody, because I think, yeah, I'll let you kind of dive into it and let you cook here. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of different ways you can approach this for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So taking it off an exchange, a lot of the times, exchanges just allow you to withdraw. Sometimes they might have a limit on how much you can withdraw, but they just allow you to withdraw the Bitcoin to whatever address you want. And so when you get, let's say, an app on your phone that has a Bitcoin wallet on it, um, example of this might be like Blue Wallet, for example. There's an option to just click receive, and then you get an address and copy that address into your exchange and withdraw it to that address, and that will come to your wallet in one of these chunks. So however much you send to that address, let's say you send 100,000 satoshis, you'll get a UTXO of 100,000 satoshis to your wallet, right? Um, so when we're talking about taking self custody, I think it's important to realize a couple of things. One is it's important to have an idea of where each chunk has come from, and then to have an idea of um, kind of like the different sizes of chunks you have. So you want to keep track of where they came from because in my example before, where like you can mix chunks together, right? When you spend them or send them somewhere else, whenever you mix a couple chunks together, everyone on the network can see it, right? Bitcoin's an open ledger, which means that everyone can see every single movement of every chunk or UTXO of Bitcoin. So if you had one chunk that you got from, withdrawing from exchange, and then another chunk that you got from mining or you got from doing some work for your neighbor, then mixing those two would in effect tell everyone on the network that, hey, like, those two that just got mixed together are probably owned by the same person. So now you've lost some privacy. And, because one of those chunks was mined or earned from doing some work, that chunk was most likely, you didn't have to provide your identity for it. So it's non KYC. And the chunk that you withdrew from the exchange is KYC. When you put in your like ID and stuff into the exchange, they track everything. So whatever chunks you get from the exchange, you can basically treat those like they're being tracked by the government because they are. But chunks that you get from anywhere else, whether you mine it or earn it from doing some work or sell some stuff for Bitcoin, those chunks are not, necessarily tied to your identity or being tracked. So you want to keep those separate. Um, I guess the other part was like keeping track of the sizes. So this really has to do with like when you spend Bitcoin. If you, let's say you wanted to buy something that was 100,000 sats, right? In the future, and all you have is chunks that are 10 million satoshis or more, that could be, like for security purposes, that could be a little dangerous, especially if that purchase is in person, because it'd be similar to like, walking into a corner store and buying a candy bar with like $1 million bill if it existed, right? You wouldn't feel very safe walking home knowing that the teller just saw that you had $1 million bill. He might tell his friends like, "Hey, that fucking stupid Apple has one of those $1 million bills." Like you should probably rob him on the way home. So like, yeah, sorry for my language. I don't know if that's a problem here.
No, that's
Um,
fine. This isn't a kid show.
but anyways, that's kind of the idea behind like keeping track of your sizes, keeping track of where they're coming from. It's mostly forward-facing privacy and security concerns. When you're buying something in the future that costs 100,000 sats, it'd be nice if you had a UTXO that's around the size of 100,000 sats. So you can just spend the right chunk, and so on and so forth.
So yeah, I mean, I guess one question. So you brought up the KYC aspect of things, right? So and kind of like the self custody and like holding the different things. But why don't we, I guess, just explain like the different wallet types and like kind of ways that you can store, Bitcoin, because you kind of I guess touched on it when it came to spending and other things like that. But
Mhm.
I guess one, like, what are the main differences between like I guess a Coinbase and a Blue Wallet, and then maybe something like Sparrow. So for those who don't know, Sparrow is like kind of a, I guess, I'll let you go into that, and I'll let you kind of
Sure.
explain it. But yeah, I think like the other important aspect is like not only the UTXO management for spending, but also for saving. I think it can be kind of important too, because as you're describing it, it's almost like the FDIC thing that we're seeing with like bank accounts, right? You don't want to have too much in one bank account, because if something happens, maybe you don't store it properly, you can run into some trouble. So yeah, let's talk about the different ways of like storing Bitcoin.
Sure. Um, yeah, so I mean, there's a few different ways. I guess let's first talk about kind of, some of the hot wallets, right? So a hot wallet is a wallet that is connected to the internet or, periodically comes online. That's why it's hot. So a few examples of hot wallets might be like, like I mentioned before, Blue Wallet. That's a self-custody on-chain wallet that allows you to have your own private keys, and nobody else has access to those private keys in the case of that wallet. It's also, I believe, open source. So like, you'll hear a lot of Bitcoiners talk about open source. And all that means, like when they say that, is that the code is, uh, basically, anyone can look at the code and check to make sure that there's no funny business going on in the app, like they're not stealing your keys or making your keys in, an unsafe way or anything like that. So a lot of the times when you hear, Bitcoiner talk about an app being open source, it's kind of like they're giving the stamp of approval by saying, this has most likely been vetted. Um, and your Bitcoin's probably safe on there. A wallet that might be not open source and you probably don't want to use is like the Coinbase wallet, right? Like that one's definitely not open source as far as I know. And even though they say that they give you your own keys, you don't know if they're storing your copy of them, and you don't know if you don't know how they're making them, and all these types of things like that. So I would not recommend one like that. And then I'd say the one that I recommend the most is Sparrow Wallet. This is a desktop wallet, so it's only downloadable on your computer, right? Your desktop or your laptop. Um, but it's has a lot more features and allows you to. One of my favorite features is that allows you to see your UTXOs. So like it allows you to see the different sizes of UTXOs you have, and it allows you to label your UTXOs. so you can keep track of them a lot easier. Yeah, so those are the hot wallets. Uh, it's probably good to say, like, of the hot wallets that I just mentioned, so Blue Wallet and Sparrow Wallet. And as a matter of fact, like, I'd say most, if not all, Bitcoin only wallets. I don't know of any instances where they've been compromised in terms of, like, someone hacking into them and stealing your keys. At least of the ones that are out now, right? I mean, there's been instances in the past, but like the ones that are out now, Blue Wallet, Sparrow Wallet, some of these other ones. Um, those ones, I think they're good to use, and so, like, you're probably fine storing a little bit of Bitcoin in that way. Now, once you get to, like, a bit more Bitcoin, like, once it becomes kinda your main savings vehicle, um, you might wanna look into having what some people call a cold wallet, and what that means is it's just like your private keys were never on a device that's ever touched the internet. So, a lot of times people will make these with, um, these hardware wallets or signing devices that you see floating around. So, like, uh, Cold Card is a very popular one among Bitcoiners. It's a device that kind of looks like a calculator, and it just, it basically allows you to make your private keys, but it never connects to the internet, right? So you can make your private keys, and you can be confident that there's absolutely no way that anyone has seen those private keys, right? Like, you just, you never plug it into the computer, you never do anything like that. Those private keys are safe on that device. Um, so that'd be like a cold storage wallet, right? And then one step further would be like, okay, I'm planning on using this wallet for saving. I don't really ever spend, I don't ever really plan to spend it. So maybe you've generated your private keys from your cold card, but because you don't really plan to spend it, you just stamp the seed phrase in a piece of metal, and that would be like, deep freeze storage or something, right? Like, and then you delete it off your cold card. So, like, the only version of that seed phrase is on like a piece of metal that 100% absolutely cannot be connected to the internet because it's a piece of fucking metal. So that'd be like number three. Uh, yeah. So I'd say that's like the main types of storage. It's probably good to mention, like, with a signing device like a cold card, or in the case, if you stamped it as a piece of metal and that's all you have. With those, you'll need like a wallet interface to generate receive addresses. And so this is where I would recommend Sparrow. Sparrow is really, really good at interfacing with signing devices and cold wallets, or you know cold storage in general, right? And it allows you to generate a receive address, but Sparrow never has access to your underlying seed phrase, so that stays offline. But yeah, I'd say that's, I don't know. What did I
Yeah,
miss? I
those.
know I missed some stuff there.
No, you did. I don't think you really missed anything, but the stuff that you named, is, I guess, the relatively safe, and, like, I guess, the almost like, I guess, gets the Bitcoiner stamp of approval. But the previous way, but like before 2020, I think, like, the most popular way before a lot of these things kind of came out, I guess, somewhat recently, was Ledger. And I don't know if
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
had any interaction with that. But
I did. Yep.
yeah, it is kind of interesting because Ledger did get hacked, and I think I just pulled it up. Two hundred and 272,000 customers were affected by the data breach. Where essentially it was like 1 million email addresses were leaked, personal information such as postal addresses, first and last names were exposed. And then because of all that, I guess you can't really guarantee that the amount of, Bitcoin, or I guess it holds other crypto too, unfortunately, but other things like that weren't breached as well. So, I think, as far as, like, things you named the things that are so far the proven to be the safest routes, and the ones that haven't been hacked, because obviously, like I said, Ledger has been, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that hack wasn't Ledger specifically. That was, they were using a service for storing customer information, and I think that's the service that got hacked. And that was unfortunate. I definitely was part of that leak. But yeah, no, I used Ledger in the past, and as a signing device, like it worked, right? And never lost my Bitcoin or anything like that. But ultimately, I decided to stop using ledgers because I was mostly uncomfortable with. So there's two things. First, they're not open source. So even though they've had people audit their code, it's like it's people who are paid to audit the code, right? So that's a little different to me when it's people who are paid and people who are just like in there trying to find problems um, with like an open source code. Sorry. And then the other reason is because they support shitcoins. So when you support shitcoins, I think that it probably opens the attack surface up on your device because you're not focused on making the best, wallet for storing Bitcoin securely. You're also working on how can we enable, this and that and NFTs and all this, kind of stuff that I don't care about. So when you enable all that stuff, what it means to me is like you're not spending very much time on the thing that I care about, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the product or the signing device that has a team of devs, dedicated to making this the most secure signing device ever for Bitcoin, right? For Bitcoin only. That's the only thing I care about. And it'd be nice if you throw in some, additional features. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, the cold card has, some cool features that I use. We can talk about that a little bit if you want, but yeah. So, anyways, um, all that to say, yeah, there's devices that are Bitcoin only. There's devices that are, open source, um, and I would probably tend to recommend those ones over other ones.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. What are some of the cool features that you like about Cold Card? And obviously this isn't a paid ad or anything like that. You just enjoy the product. So, tell us a
It
little bit.
should be.
Yeah.
It sh-
Hey, I mean, if they want to reach out and sponsor the pod, I'm more than happy to add them. So, my DMs are open if they're listening. But yeah,
uh,
let's hear it. Why Cold Card? What are some of your favorite features about it? And obviously we've kind of talked about how it's not able to connect to the internet really, and all the kind of the positive aspects of it in that sense. But what are some of the other features you like about it, and why it's like one I guess you recommend?
sure. Yeah, so the first thing that I like is the dice roll application that it has built in. So this basically allows you to generate your seed phrase by using dice, right? So you literally roll a die or a series of dice. Um, if you want to, generate all of your own entropy for your seed phrase, you roll a die, 100 times, right? But yeah, you roll it 100 times, you punch in the number, and then it will generate your seed phrase from that randomness or that entropy that comes from those dice. So I like that feature a lot. As a matter of fact, like, I have a ledger, right, that generates its seeds in some mysterious way. And it's like it's still a good, it's like a decent signing device, right? I only have the Bitcoin firmware on there. I don't want to throw it away. So like what you can do is with your cold card, you can actually make the seed phrase in a way where there's nothing shady going on. You make it with the dice and then you can recover that using the ledger. Now, I still wouldn't use the ledger to like store a bunch of Bitcoin, but maybe, it might be interesting to use it in like a multi-sig, for example. Um, but anyways, yeah, so dice roll, I like that a lot. Um, Another feature that's cool is BIP85. So this is um, a feature for Bitcoin that allows you to make a bunch of brand new seed phrases by using just one seed phrase as kind of like the parent seed. So you basically, you have like a parent seed, right? So you get your 12 or your 24 words. That's your seed phrase. And then BIP85 allows you to make a bunch of child seed phrases, which are just indexes. So it's like, you use BIP85 and you can make like unlimited, or I think 9,999 child seed phrases by just indexing between 0 and, 9998 or whatever. Um, And what's cool about that is like if if you're the type of person that's helping out a bunch of your family members or friends set up their seed phrase, but they don't quite trust themselves to do it, or you don't quite trust them to do it, you can you can generate their seed phrase in this way so that you can recover their seed if they ever lose it by having your kind of like your master seed phrase and the index of whatever child that you've given them. So one way I've used this is, I stamp, like I'll stamp metal plates and send a specific amount of Bitcoin. Like I'll have metal plates that are like, you know, 200,000 sats, 500,000 sats, a million sats, right? I have these various metal plates, and I'll stamp the 12-word seed phrase on them that I generated from BIP85, but it's all using the same parent seed phrase. So I don't have to keep track of like every single seed phrase for every metal plate. Now I just have to keep track of, you know, the parent seed phrase. And if I ever lose the seed phrase for those metal plates, I can just recover it with the index. But anyways, I'll sometimes I'll give these out for like gifts or something. And that way, if they're ever like, hey man, remember that metal plate you gave me 3 years ago? I lost it. I can be like, okay, I got you. Like, I kept the spreadsheet, whatever. Uncle Jim is index number 4. So I can like recover it in that way. Right. And I don't have to keep track of like a million, different 12-word seed phrases. Not that I'm giving out, millions of these, but you get the point.
Yeah, so I mean, talk to me about that when it comes to orange pilling, newbies and, explaining the importance of self custody. I guess how is that received? Are you bringing this to, I guess, people who have never interacted with Bitcoin, or maybe they've just heard it a time or two, or think it's, funny internet money? Like,
Mhm.
what is, I guess, in general the response you get when you, maybe bring somebody this metal plate?
Yeah, I it's funny. Well, it's funny because I think the response has actually gradually changed and in a good way. So the way that it was, maybe a couple of years ago, or maybe even a few years ago, was like, what is this? They didn't get it. They didn't have any motive to understand it. And a lot of the times I would help them either set up their own device, right? So like I bought a bunch of my friends and family's ledgers back in the day, and I'd help them set them up and like, tell them about the seed phrase and be like, keep this safe, put it in a safe, don't let anyone, see it because they'll steal your Bitcoin if they do. But a lot of the times, they would just like, they'd get it, send a little Bitcoin to it, and then forget about it, right? And I think there's a lot of, I still have a lot of friends and family who did it that way. And it's like they've got a little bit of Bitcoin just, saved in their safe, and that's kind of it. And I'm expecting that once they decide they want to spend it or, use it, they'll call me and be like, "Hey, how do I do this again?" And then I'll be like, "Do you remember your PIN?" And they'll be like, "No." And I'll be, "Okay, well, you're gonna need that 24-word seed phrase then," and then we'll go from there. Um, uh, but more recently, people have actually been a lot more receptive in understanding the importance of self-custody. I think primarily driven by uncertainty in banks, they realize the importance of being in control of your own money, right? So like I've got a lot of, friends who are coming to me worried about their money in their banks. And, it's like the two options are it's like you take out cash and you have dollar bills, which are, becoming worth less and less over time. And you're seeing it literally like year over year. It's obvious now. Or you figure out how to do this Bitcoin thing. And it's like you have it in the same way that you would have cash, you have Bitcoin now. You might not be able to spend it as easily, but hey, at least you can save it, right? For now. You can spend it in the future once people figure it out, but like save it for now. But I think the uncertainty with banks has just taught people that self-custody is important, or at the very least that, I mean, they might not know the words counterparty risk, but they understand counterparty risk is important to like to know about, or it's dangerous, right? Like it's dangerous to trust other people with your money. It's becoming more and more clear that it's dangerous to trust banks with your money. it's dangerous to trust, you know, anybody with your money. It's like you got to kind of just have it yourself. That's the only person you can trust is yourself, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's the key word there, hopefully at the end. But I think it's interesting too because in my experience, anytime I've given anybody Bitcoin, it's been likely been on an exchange, whether it's like Cash App or something else.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
as soon as the price goes down, they're looking at me like, Brandon, what the hell did you give me? This is a piece of shit. This doesn't work. All this and that. But I'm kind of surprised to hear that you're saying that when you give it to them in cold storage, that they're more receptive. Obviously, they can't like really spend it, and maybe because they don't have as easy access to, like, I guess, the Bitcoin price, they're not really like looking like at it constantly. Because the way I
Hmm.
feel about
Hmm.
it is like, even with just general investments, whether it's stocks or real estate or gold or whatever, like if you don't really believe in your investment, that's where you get the paper hands, like people kind of just
Yep.
selling off because they don't really understand it. So I do think it's pretty interesting that you've used that tactic and it seems to be pretty successful. But in that note, like, where do you think we're kind of at when it comes to adoption? When it comes to like normies kind of understanding it? Obviously, this bank run has seemed to kind of help, I guess, open some normies' eyes that, hey, like, this, like, one, that there's fractional reserve banking, which I don't think a lot of people realize, that your bank actually doesn't have all the money that's in your account there. um, and two, that a bank isn't necessarily safe. So, like, in your opinion, like, I'm not saying we're going to have like hyper Bitcoinization, or everybody's going to be using Bitcoin tomorrow, but in that aspect, especially like in kind of like the US, like, where do you think that we're at as far as like a general understanding of the importance of it and the technology behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general understanding of the importance of it is evolving in many, many different ways, and kind of accelerating in the people who understand it and in the ways that people are are understanding it, right? It seems like there's like almost like a new way in which Bitcoin's improving some aspect of, life, every few months, just like, holy shit, I didn't even think about that. And that's like, then it comes up. Um, but in terms of like general adoption, I think Bitcoin is going to probably end up being very similar in its adoption curve. And this isn't anything new. Like everyone said this already, but like to the internet, where I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I remember growing up and there was internet, but it was really shitty. And like nobody used it. And people talked about how nobody's going to use it because it's so shitty, right? And it's slow. And it can only do, 14 transactions per second. And, you know what I'm saying? And then what do you know? Like 20 years later, all of a sudden everyone's using it for everything, right? And they don't even think about it. Like you just use it. It's just part of your everyday life. Um, I think that's probably going to be the same type of thing with Bitcoin, where right now we're in that phase where it's like it's still in its growing phase, and there's really, I mean, I think even well, more recently though, there's been a lot of development on top of it. So this is kind of that ramp up phase now, where I think we're getting pretty close to where it will become effortless to use Bitcoin for a normal person. I think it's already light years past what it was even like 5, 10 years ago, right? Obviously. But another 5 years, I think it'll be even more, simple for normies to use it. And it'll just be something that everyone uses, right? You won't even think about like Bitcoin on Lightning or Bitcoin impediments or Bitcoin on chain. It'll just be like Bitcoin. It'll be like, this costs 200 sats. You'll be like, all right, here you go. Boop. And that's it. You won't even think about it. Um, so I think that's coming pretty soon. I do believe that it kind of has to go through the different phases. Like it has to literally be in enough people's wallets. Enough people have to hold it for it to be a useful medium of exchange. Otherwise, people just won't know its value or they won't value it, right? But once enough people have it, then it becomes very obvious that you can start to charge. people and charge people for things in Bitcoin because they have it, right? If enough people have it, then you just use it as money. So I do think that's coming pretty soon. I would say 5 years. I mean, I try to like give really long, more long-term estimates, right? Like everyone wants it to come next year or in 2 years. But honestly, I would be happy if it took 5 years. I might even be happy if it took 10 years. I've got a good 5 or 10 more years of solid, proof of work in me, and I would like to pack my bags a little bit more full before it becomes mainstream. So the longer I have to get that stack, the happier I'll be. But if it happens, sooner, it is what it is. But yeah, I'd say hopefully within 5 years we'll be able to pay for our gas in Bitcoin or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that point because, I don't know. I think in the US and maybe even in other countries, like, I mean, if you look at El Salvador, right? I haven't been out there yet, but from what I understand, everything's still kind of priced in dollars, but you can pay in Bitcoin in like 90% of the stores or whatever it is, maybe 60%, I don't know. But,
Mhm.
nothing has really been priced in sats just yet.
Yep.
But I don't know if you've seen like kind of the recent news. We've seen like China is making a transaction in the yuan, and there's other
Yep.
countries kind of moving away from transacting in the US dollar. So it would be interesting, yeah, if somebody kind of prices whatever transaction it is. And I would imagine like, maybe it'll be more peer to peer in like the US or something like that, or maybe like a store does it, or something along those lines. But I think at the end of the day, most people are going to probably price things in dollars until, you know, I guess something like a big transaction from a country to country, and then some sort of asset then begins priced in it, and that
Yeah.
asset's most likely something like energy wise, like whether it's petroleum or oil or gas or something like that. So, but I think a lot of Bitcoiners are kind of pushing it for like you said to be in the next couple years. I still think like 5 years would be kind of quick. I think we need to do a
Mhm.
lot of other development and things like that still. But, as I say that, I didn't think we would be where we're at today, like 3, 4, 5 years ago either. So, you never know with this adoption curve because, like you said, it's gradually then kind of suddenly too. So, I guess on that note, when it comes to adoption and other things like that, uh, I guess what do you think are the most important aspects that we need to improve in order to, get more widespread adoption? Do you think it needs to be, maybe more countries, adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, or do we need to have, I guess, more development when it becomes to apps? Does like the user experience need to improve? Like, what are some of the things that you'd like to see improve and that you think would kind of help push that adoption a little bit more forward?
Sure. I mean, I think that, um, yeah, I mean, I think that payments is probably the part that is the biggest, n you know, kind of hole, right? And with Lightning Network, that hole is quickly being filled. Um, and I don't know, I'm like, if you've used Lightning Network over the past 2 years, like even from 2 years ago, it's gotten significantly better. Um, both just I mean, in part because there's just more liquidity, there's more people using it, right? And so that it's a stronger network in that sense. But also as a protocol, it's a lot of development's been happening on it. And so it just gets better and better, right? As they kind of update it and make it more efficient in different ways. One thing that I'm looking forward to, and I don't know a ton about it, but this idea of splicing on Lightning. So, uh, Dusty Damon, I think is his name. He's a Lightning developer. He's working on splicing, and this I think will be one of those moments where it's like the internet all of a sudden being able to play HD video, and it's like boom. Now we're all watching video on the internet because like, but like that came out of nowhere, right? You remember that, like when you couldn't, and then you could, and then like all of a sudden everyone's doing it. So with
Yeah,
with
exactly. That like kind of killed Blu-ray because remember Blu-ray discs that was around for like maybe even just a year. And I remember I
yeah,
got
man,
it like a PlayStation 3 or 4 or something, and everybody's
yeah,
like, "Oh
just
my
to
God, I
play the
could!"
Blu-ray.
Yeah, like, "Oh my God, I can play Blu-ray," and they had to
Yeah,
sell separate Blu-ray like DVDs, and then
yeah,
Netflix came out with like streaming and everything, and that just killed
yeah,
everything. Yeah,
yeah. Streaming in 4K. Yeah, bye bye
yeah,
Blu-ray.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but yeah, yeah. I mean, so but similar to that, I think like so. Just a little bit about splicing from my basic understanding. It basically allows you to adjust channel sizes on the fly, which is an incredible idea. So, right now the problem with Lightning is that like you're kind of tied up with the channels that you have and liquidity, and that it's a kind of clunky to shut down channels or to open new ones or to like kind of swap liquidity between Lightning channels and on-chain, UTXOs, right? But apparently with splicing, it should make this much um, like a much smoother experience. And so uh, I think that update alone will have a pretty significant impact. And of course, 99% of people won't even know that it happened. They'll just be like, oh, Lightning works a lot better and the fees are a lot lower all of a sudden. And they might not even notice it. They'll just be like, the user experience will just get better and they won't even know it. They'll just be like, oh yeah, Lightning's awesome, right? That's just kind of how it goes. Uh, but yeah, so that's, hopefully that will come out in the next 6 months to a year or whatever. Um, and it's just these little incremental steps and some larger steps that just make the whole system better. But I guess the question was, yeah, what is Bitcoin lacking? That was a question, right? Aside from that, I mean, maybe like inheritance planning. I don't know. We don't have to talk about that though if you don't want. But like, yeah, that's kind of a boring, mundane one. But like, that one's always tough because it's just like, yeah, man, there's not really a good option for that yet, and we just kind of have to wait until there is. But so far, that's a tough one.
Yeah, what is inheritance mining? I've actually never heard of that before.
Oh no, inheritance planning. Inheritance
Okay,
planning.
okay.
Yeah,
All right. All
yeah.
right. I was
Inheritance
about to
mining.
say like what does that even entail? I don't know. But all right, I get what you're saying. Yeah. I think actually like some companies like Unchained and Casa, I know Casa's kind of, allowed people to, multi-sig their ETH, but I think Unchained now allows you to do some sort of like inheritance planning where they hold one, key or whatever, and if you in the
Mhm.
event you pass or something like that. So I know that there's some products, but I don't know. I doubt that they're very widely used, to be honest with you, because yeah, I don't know if anybody's planning that far ahead in Bitcoin land.
Well, I
I don't
mean,
know.
I think you typically use those tools when you have a shit ton of Bitcoin, right? Like if you got a lot of Bitcoin, you're like, man, I don't feel comfortable holding or dealing with or passing on, whatever. If you got like billions or more Satoshis, you're probably getting up there. So I think at that point, you're probably considering those types of products. But what I'm saying is like, it'd be nice if you could just do that in a self-sovereign way, right? Like if there was some type of inheritance planning features on chain and you didn't have to worry about, trusting other people or having a third party that has another key or whatever, right? I mean, those systems work and people are using them, right? I think they work fine. But it makes it where it's like there's kind of a barrier to entry, right? They're pretty pricey and um, and it involves a bit of trust. So yeah, so it would be nice if there was like vaults on
Yeah,
Bitcoin, that type of thing.
yeah. I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to go through this thought experiment because I don't know if I've really, I guess, thought about that because just in general, like as humans, as far back as we've gone, when it comes to like inheritance planning, we've always had to trust, somebody else, or whether it's the law or a will or something along those lines that kind of, helps, those after we pass. And we've
Hmm.
never really had a way where, you could essentially go from, I guess, passing and then, essentially just not even having to trust anybody that your, relatives just kind of know what to do to get your Bitcoin. I don't know. That's an
Yeah,
interesting little thought experiment.
yeah. I mean, I like one of the ideas is it'd be cool if it was easy to set up a system where If you don't, sign for your Bitcoin once every 6 months, say, then it automatically gets sent to another address that, you've given the private keys to your children for, right? Or it gets split up and sent to like these various, people that you want to inherit your Bitcoin. Um, so yeah, I mean, it'd be cool if you could just do that on chain, right? Without anyone's help. Obviously, some slick UX, app would help out, right? If you didn't have to like code it yourself, but but it would be cool if there's like an app to do that. But I think Bitcoin needs some updates. Can you still hear me?
I don't know if I lost you for a second, but Wicked, you still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm still here. Maybe my internet's shitty. Still there? You hear me? No. You got me now? Yeah. Yeah, no, okay.
Well, Wicked, I don't know if you can still hear me or not. I don't know what happened. My AirPods died. And unfortunately, I don't think I can hear you. I don't know. But I appreciate you coming on. And yeah, why don't you tell everybody, where they can find you, where they can see your great animations, and yeah, what you all got going on in the Bitcoin space.
Sure. Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the audience can hear me, but you can find me, I'm mostly posting on Twitter, my animations and stuff. You can find me on Twitter, um, W_S_Bitcoin, WS Bitcoin. Yeah, I don't know. That's really it. I mean, nothing too special. Maybe you'll catch me on a space, come on Cafe Bitcoins in the morning. Sometimes I run my own um, about self custody and stuff. So if I'm ever running one of those, feel free to come up and ask questions. But yeah, I think that's it, man. We're communicating through chat right now.
All right. Well, I hope Wicked is it was all done with that, but I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. We're going over UTXOs and all the great things that you need to know to really dive into self custody and other things like that. So I hope the audience really, I think the audience is really going to enjoy this episode and learn a lot, especially for those newcomers in there. So if you're listening on YouTube, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on any audio podcast, please subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Give it a 5-star rating. Help the show out. And Wicked, thanks so much, man. I'm gonna have to have you back on at some point in time, maybe to talk about some of these cool animations or other things like that. So I appreciate you powering through with me at the end here when I couldn't really hear you, unfortunately.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. This is so funny.